The great hall falls silent as Clara stands before the Alpha's council, her voice cutting through their arguments. "Stop treating families like political assets," she demands, her hands trembling but her gaze unwavering. Outside, the storm rages. Inside, a seamstress challenges the most powerful wolves in the territory. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from. And don't forget to click subscribe. The kitchen smelled like burned bread and desperation. Clara Whitmore stood over the ruined loaf, her hands trembling as she tried to salvage what was left of her attempt at dinner. This was the third time this week she had failed at something so simple, and the weight of her inadequacy pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing. She was 24 years old, plain-faced, with mousy brown hair that refused to hold a curl, and a figure that was neither willowy nor voluptuous, just ordinary in every possible way. Her sister Josephine had gotten all the beauty in the family, all the grace, all the charm that made men turn their heads and women smile with envy. Clara had gotten the sturdy build and the practical nature, the ability to scrub floors and mend clothes and manage a household budget. Useful skills, certainly, but not the kind that inspired poetry or prompted marriage proposals from eligible bachelors. Their mother had died when Clara was 16, leaving her to raise Josephine, who was 10 years younger. Their father had followed their mother to the grave just 2 years later, his heart simply giving out one winter morning, and Clara had been left alone to manage everything. She had done her best, working as a seamstress during the day and taking in laundry at night, scraping together enough money to keep them fed and housed in their small cottage at the edge of Millbrook territory. Josephine had grown up beautiful and wanted, accepting a marriage proposal from a wealthy merchant's son last spring and moving to the city without a backward glance. Clara had been happy for her sister, truly happy, even as she felt the loneliness settle into her bones like winter frost. Now she was alone in the cottage that felt too large and too empty, still taking in sewing and laundry to pay the rent, still living the same quiet, unremarkable life she had always lived. The burned bread was destined for her own dinner, and Clara scraped the worst of the char off with a knife, knowing she would eat it anyway, because wasting food was a sin she could not afford. She had just sat down at the small wooden table when a knock at the door made her jump. Visitors were rare, especially at this hour when the sun was beginning to set, and most respectable folks were already home preparing their own meals. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door, pulling it open to find a man standing on her doorstep, who made her breath catch in her throat. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that were the color of storm clouds. His clothing marked him as someone of status, well-tailored and expensive, and there was an air of authority about him that made Clara want to step back and lower her gaze in instinctive submission. This was not a man who knocked on doors in humble cottages at the edge of pack territory. This was someone important, someone powerful, someone who should not be here at all. Clara's hands went to her apron automatically, smoothing the wrinkles, acutely aware of how she must look with flour in her hair and the smell of burned bread clinging to her clothes. "Excuse me, miss," the man said, his voice deep and controlled with an edge of exhaustion that suggested he had been traveling for some time. "I apologize for the intrusion at this hour. I'm looking for lodging for the night. The inn in town is full, and I was told there might be someone on this road who takes in travelers for a fee." Clara stared at him, her mind struggling to process the request. The inn was full because tomorrow was market day. when merchants and farmers from neighboring territories would descend on Millbrook to trade goods and conduct business. She had forgotten completely, too caught up in her own small struggles, to remember that the wider world continued to turn around her. She did not take in travelers, had never taken in travelers, but looking at this man standing on her doorstep as darkness began to fall, she found herself unable to simply turn him away. "I don't normally," she began, then stopped, uncertain how to finish the sentence. The man waited patiently, and Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I mean, I've never done it before. Taken in lodgers, that is, but I suppose, if you're willing to accept humble accommodations, I could make up the spare room. It's not much, just a bed and a washstand, but it's clean." The man's expression softened slightly. Something that might have been relief crossing his features. That would be more than adequate. "Thank you. I can pay whatever your usual rate is." Clara had no idea what a usual rate would be for a room, had no frame of reference for such things, but she found herself quoting a number that seemed reasonable, perhaps slightly less than reasonable, given the quality of her accommodations compared to the inn. The man agreed without hesitation, pulling coins from his pocket and pressing them into her hand. It was more than she had asked for, enough to cover several nights rather than just one, but before she could protest, he had already stepped inside, ducking slightly to clear the door frame. "I'm Clara," she said belatedly, realizing she had not introduced herself. "Clara Whitmore." The man set down the travel bag he had been carrying and turned to face her fully, and Clara felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. "I'm Nathaniel," he said simply, not offering a surname or any additional information about who he was or why he was traveling through Millbrook territory. Clara wanted to ask, curiosity burning in her chest, but years of minding her own business kept the questions locked behind her teeth. She led Nathaniel to the spare room, the one that had been Josephine's before she married and moved away, and busied herself changing the linens and making sure everything was presentable while he waited in the doorway. "I was just about to have dinner," Clara said when she finished, smoothing the quilt one final time even though it did not need smoothing. "It's nothing fancy, just bread and soup. But you're welcome to join me if you're hungry." She expected him to decline, to retreat to his room and produce travel rations or simply go to bed hungry rather than accept charity from a stranger. But instead, Nathaniel nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That sounds perfect, actually. I've been on the road all day and I'm starving." Clara felt panic flutter in her chest. The burned bread, the simple vegetable soup that was more water than substance. This was not food to serve to someone who clearly came from money and status. But she could not take back the invitation now, could not admit that her dinner was barely adequate for herself, let alone for a guest who deserved better. She served the meal in her small kitchen, setting out the bread she had scraped clean of char and the soup that looked thin and unappetizing in the chipped bowls. Nathaniel sat at the table without complaint, and Clara watched from the corner of her eye as he took his first bite of bread. She saw him pause, saw the slight furrow of his brow, and wanted to sink through the floor with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I'm not much of a cook. The bread burned, and the soup is mostly just broth because I haven't had time to go to market this week. I know it's not what you're used to." She was rambling now, unable to stop the flow of apologetic words. "I ain't pretty, sir, and I ain't clever, but I can usually cook better than this. It's just been a hard week, and I've been distracted, and I'm sorry you're getting the worst of my attempts at being hospitable." Nathaniel set down his bread and looked at her with an expression Clara could not read. "Why would you say that?" he asked, his tone careful and measured. "Say what? That you're not pretty or clever. Where did that come from?" Clara felt her face burn hotter. "Because it's true. I'm plain as dirt and about as interesting. My sister got all the beauty and charm in our family. I got the practical skills, the ability to work hard and keep a house running. But that's all I've got. And right now I can't even manage to cook a decent meal for a paying guest. So I'm failing at the one thing I'm supposed to be good at." The silence that followed was excruciating. Clara kept her eyes on her own bowl, unable to look at Nathaniel, certain she had said too much and revealed too much of the inadequacy that lived inside her like a permanent resident. But when he finally spoke, his voice was gentler than she expected. "You're wrong," he said simply. "About what?" "About all of it. You're wrong about yourself, Clara." She did look up then, surprised enough to meet his gaze. Nathaniel was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I've been traveling for 3 weeks," he continued, "staying in inns and manor houses and places that pride themselves on their hospitality. I've eaten elaborate meals prepared by professional cooks, slept in beds that cost more than most people earn in a year, been fawned over by servants who see only my status and my money. And not one of those places felt like home. Not one of those people looked at me like I was anything other than a source of income or influence." He gestured around the small kitchen, at the humble furnishings and the simple meal. "But you opened your door to a stranger at sunset. You offered me lodging when you'd never done it before. You're apologizing for burned bread and thin soup when you had every right to tell me to go find accommodations elsewhere. You're genuine, Clara. You're kind. And those things are worth more than physical beauty or cleverness any day." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously, refusing to cry in front of this stranger who was saying things she had never heard before, things she wanted desperately to believe but did not quite dare to. "You're just being polite," she managed. "You don't have to say nice things because I'm giving you a room for the night." "I'm not being polite," Nathaniel said, and there was steel beneath the gentleness now. "I'm being honest, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop diminishing yourself. You have value, Clara Whitmore, whether you see it or not." They ate the rest of the meal in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. Clara found herself stealing glances at Nathaniel, trying to understand this stranger who had appeared on her doorstep and somehow seen through the armor of self-deprecation she had been wearing for so long. It felt like a second skin. When the meal was finished, Nathaniel helped her clear the table without being asked, carrying the dishes to the wash basin and even offering to help clean them. Clara shooed him away, insisting that guests did not do chores. But she was touched by the offer in a way she could not quite articulate. That night, as she lay in her own bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of another person moving around in the house, Clara allowed herself to think about Nathaniel's words. "You have value." When was the last time someone had said something like that to her? When was the last time anyone had looked past her plain face and practical nature to see something worth valuing? She fell asleep with the question unanswered, but with something warm and hopeful blooming in her chest for the first time in years. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn as was her habit, dressing quickly and heading to the kitchen to start breakfast. She was determined to redeem herself from last night's culinary disaster, to show Nathaniel that she was not completely incompetent in the kitchen. She had eggs from her neighbor's chickens, bacon from the market, and fresh milk. She could make a proper breakfast, something substantial and well prepared that would send her guest on his way, with a better impression than burned bread and watery soup. Clara worked carefully, taking her time with each element of the meal. The bacon sizzled in the pan, filling the kitchen with its rich aroma. The eggs cooked perfectly, their yolks still soft and their whites firm. She even managed to bake fresh biscuits in her small oven, golden and flaky, and worlds better than the disaster from the night before. When Nathaniel emerged from the spare room, drawn by the smells of cooking food, Clara had the table set with her best dishes and a spread that looked genuinely appetizing. "Good morning," she said, feeling a flutter of nervous pride. "I hope you slept well." Nathaniel stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene before him. For a moment he said nothing, and Clara felt her confidence begin to waver. Had she overdone it? Was it presumptuous to prepare such a large breakfast for a guest who was probably eager to be on his way? Then Nathaniel smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his entire face and made Clara's heart do something strange and fluttery in her chest. "I slept better than I have in months," he said, moving to the table. "And this looks incredible, Clara. You didn't have to go to so much trouble." "It's no trouble," Clara said quickly, serving him a plate piled high with food. "I wanted to make up for last night, show you that I can actually cook when I'm not having a terrible day." They ate together, and Clara watched with satisfaction as Nathaniel cleared his plate with obvious enjoyment. He complimented every element of the meal, from the perfectly cooked eggs to the flaky biscuits, and Clara felt something in her chest expand with warmth. This was what she was good at, caring for people, making them comfortable, providing sustenance and comfort through food prepared with attention and care. It might not be as glamorous as beauty, or as impressive as clever conversation, but it was her skill, her contribution, her way of showing value. When breakfast was finished and Nathaniel had helped her clean up despite her protests, he did not immediately gather his things and leave, as Clara had expected. Instead, he lingered in the kitchen, watching her with that same intense gaze from the night before. "Clara," he said finally, and there was something serious in his tone that made her pause in her tidying. "I need to tell you something. I haven't been entirely honest about who I am." Clara's stomach dropped. Here it was, the revelation that would explain everything. He was married. He was a criminal on the run. He was going to rob her and leave her with nothing. She braced herself for whatever confession was coming, her hands gripping the edge of the wash basin. "My full name is Nathaniel Blackwood," he said, watching her carefully. "I'm the alpha of the Northern Ridge Pack." The words took a moment to penetrate, and when they did, Clara felt the blood drain from her face. The alpha. The leader of one of the most powerful packs in the entire Northern Territories. A man who commanded the loyalty of hundreds of wolves, who made decisions that affected entire communities, who could destroy or elevate lives with a single word. And she had given him burned bread and watery soup. She had told him she was plain and uninteresting. She had treated him like an ordinary traveler instead of the powerful leader he was. "Oh, goddess," Clara breathed, her knees going weak. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never would have. I should have." Nathaniel cut her off, moving closer. "Please don't. Don't apologize for treating me like a person instead of a title. Don't regret being genuine with me. Clara, do you know how rare it is for someone in my position to be seen as just Nathaniel instead of Alpha Blackwood?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration evident in the gesture. "I spend every day surrounded by people who want something from me, who calculate every word and every action based on what they think I want to hear or how they think they can benefit from my favor. I can't remember the last time someone was just honest with me, raw and real, and unfiltered. And then you opened your door to me, apologized for burned bread, and told me you weren't pretty or clever like it was a simple fact instead of a bid for compliments. Clara did not know what to say. Her mind was still reeling from the revelation of his identity, from the fact that she had housed the Alpha of Northern Ridge in her tiny spare room with its simple furnishings and worn quilt. I still should have done better, she managed. Should have given you accommodations worthy of your position. I don't want accommodations worthy of my position, Nathaniel said, and there was something almost desperate in his voice now. I want, he paused, seeming to search for the right words. I want what you gave me last night and this morning. Genuine kindness, honest conversation, a home-cooked meal made by someone who cares about the quality of the food rather than the impression it makes. He looked around the small kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. I want to feel like I'm in a home rather than a showplace. I want to talk to someone who sees me as a man rather than a political asset. I want, and here he met her eyes directly, making Clara's breath catch. I want to know you better, Clara Whitmore. I want to understand how someone so convinced of her own ordinariness can make me feel more at peace than I've felt in years. Clara's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. This could not be real. Alphas did not express interest in plain seamstresses who lived in cottages at the edge of pack territory. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding or temporary infatuation, born of exhaustion and the novelty of being treated normally. You don't mean that, she said, hating how her voice shook. You're just being kind because I gave you a place to stay. Tomorrow you'll go back to your pack and you'll forget all about the plain woman who burned your bread. Nathaniel moved closer. Close enough that Clara could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. I've never been less certain of anything and more certain of everything at the same time, he said quietly. I came to Millbrook on pack business, yes, but I've been traveling for weeks because I needed to escape. Needed to clear my head from all the political maneuvering and strategic marriages, an endless parade of suitable Omega candidates that my advisors keep throwing at me. Every single one of them is beautiful and accomplished and perfectly trained to be an alpha's mate. And every single one of them leaves me cold because I can see the calculation in their eyes. I can feel them measuring me up as a prize to be won, rather than a person to be known. He reached out slowly, giving Clara time to step back if she wanted to, and gently tucked a strand of her mousy brown hair behind her ear. And then I knocked on your door, and you apologized for not being pretty or clever, and offered me burned bread, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't flirt, or posture, or position yourself strategically. You were just you, honest and kind, and so completely unaware of your own worth that it broke something open in my chest. Clara was trembling now, caught between the desire to believe him and the certainty that this was too good to be true. But what if you're wrong, she whispered. What if you get to know me better and realize I really am just ordinary? What if the novelty wears off and you see that I have nothing special to offer? Then I'll deal with that if and when it happens, Nathaniel said. But Clara, I've been alive for nearly 200 years. I've met thousands of people, traveled to dozens of territories, experienced more of life than most wolves dream of. And in all that time, I have never met anyone who made me feel the way you do. That's not nothing. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary in a way that has nothing to do with physical beauty or clever conversation and everything to do with who you are as a person. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, she had value beyond the practical skills and hard work that had defined her existence. But the weight of a lifetime, of being overlooked, of being the plain sister and the forgettable seamstress, and the woman men passed by without a second glance, that weight was heavy and hard to shake off. "I don't know how to be what an alpha needs," she said finally, voicing the fear that sat like a stone in her stomach. "I don't know how to navigate pack politics or host formal dinners or represent anyone with grace and poise. I'm just a seamstress who takes in laundry. I burn bread and live in a cottage that probably wouldn't meet the standards for servants' quarters in your pack house. How could I possibly be suitable for someone like you?" Nathaniel's expression softened. "You're thinking about this all wrong," he said gently. "You're looking at all the things you think you lack instead of seeing what you actually have. Yes, you might need to learn some things about pack politics and formal events, but those are skills that can be taught. What can't be taught is genuine kindness, authenticity, the ability to see people rather than positions. Those things are rare, Clara, especially in the circles I move in, and you have them in abundance." He stepped back slightly, giving her space to breathe. "I'm not asking you to be my mate right now," he continued. "I'm not asking you to make any life-changing decisions or commit to anything you're not ready for. I'm just asking if I can stay in Millbrook for a few more days, get to know you better. Let you get to know me as Nathaniel rather than Alpha Blackwood. And then, if you decide you want nothing to do with me, I'll respect that and leave you in peace. But I hope that you might be willing to give this a chance. Give us a chance." Clara looked at him, at this powerful alpha who had somehow seen value in her burned bread and self-deprecating honesty. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake, that she was setting herself up for heartbreak, that men like Nathaniel did not end up with women like her. But there was a smaller voice, quiet but persistent, that whispered, "What if he's right? What if you do have value beyond what you've been told? What if this is your chance to be seen and valued for who you actually are?" "Okay," she said finally, the word barely more than a breath. "You can stay. We can get to know each other. But Nathaniel, if you realize I'm not what you're looking for, please tell me honestly. Don't string me along out of kindness or obligation. I'd rather have my heart broken quickly than slowly." "I promise," Nathaniel said, and there was such sincerity in his voice that Clara felt some of her fear ease. "If this doesn't work, I'll tell you." "But Clara, I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to surprise yourself with exactly how extraordinary you are." The days that followed were unlike anything Clara had experienced in her entire life. Nathaniel stayed in her spare room, paying her far more than the accommodations were worth, and insisting it was fair compensation. During the days, while Clara worked on her sewing commissions and laundry orders, Nathaniel would help around the cottage, fixing things that had been broken for months, chopping wood for the winter, reinforcing the fence around her small garden. It was strange having someone in her space after so long alone, but it was also wonderful in ways she had not anticipated. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and sharing meals in the evening. Clara discovered that Nathaniel was easy to talk to, that he listened when she spoke about her childhood and her struggles raising Josephine alone, that he shared his own stories about the burdens and loneliness of leadership. He told her about his parents, both long dead, about the weight of responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders when he became alpha at a young age, about the constant pressure to mate and produce heirs to secure the pack's future. Every advisor I have thinks they know exactly who I should mate with, Nathaniel said one evening as they sat by the fire after dinner. They've paraded dozens of suitable candidates in front of me over the years. Beautiful Omega daughters from influential families, accomplished warriors from allied packs, even a princess from a foreign territory who was supposedly the perfect political match. And you weren't interested in any of them, Clara asked, trying to keep her voice neutral even as something ugly and jealous twisted in her stomach at the thought of all those beautiful, accomplished women vying for his attention. I tried to be, Nathaniel admitted. I went through the motions, attended the formal courtships, considered the strategic advantages each match would bring. But every time I got close to making a decision, something would stop me. I'd realize I was choosing based on logic rather than feeling, on what was best for the pack rather than what was best for me. And I kept thinking about my parents, about how they had a true mate bond, how they loved each other so fiercely that when my mother died, my father followed her within a year because he couldn't bear to live without her. He looked at Clara with an expression that made her heart ache. I want that, he said quietly. I want to feel something real, something that goes beyond political advantage or physical attraction. I want to find someone who sees me, really sees me, and loves what they see rather than loving the power or status that comes with being my mate. Is that what you think you found with me? Clara asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. Nathaniel met her gaze steadily. I think I've found the beginning of it, he said. I think you see me more clearly after a few days than most people do after years. And I think, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, I think when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I have in a very long time. Clara did not know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to protest, to insist that she was not special enough to inspire such feelings in someone like him. But a larger part, the part that was beginning to believe she might actually have value, wanted to accept his words at face value and let herself hope. As the days turned into a week, then two, Clara found herself falling for Nathaniel in ways she had not thought possible. It was not a sudden, overwhelming rush of emotion. It was quieter than that, more gradual, like watching the sun rise slowly over the horizon until suddenly the whole world was bathed in light. She fell for the way he laughed at her terrible jokes, the way he listened to her rambling stories about her sewing customers without ever looking bored, the way he insisted on doing the dishes after every meal even though she protested. She fell for the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and valuable rather than plain and ordinary. She fell for the moments of vulnerability he shared, the admissions about his fears and doubts as a leader, the way he trusted her with parts of himself he kept hidden from everyone else. And slowly, carefully, Clara began to believe that maybe he was right. Maybe she did have value beyond the practical skills and hard work she had always defined herself by. Maybe her kindness and authenticity and genuine care for others were worth something after all. Maybe she was worth something after all. But there were still moments of doubt, moments when the old certainties would creep back in and whisper that this could not last. That eventually Nathaniel would realize his mistake and return to his pack to find a more suitable mate. One evening, after Clara had prepared an especially elaborate dinner to celebrate Nathaniel fixing the leak in her roof that had been plaguing her for months, she found herself standing at the wash basin fighting back tears. Nathaniel appeared at her elbow, concern evident on his face. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. "Nothing," Clara said automatically. scrubbing at a pot with more force than necessary. "I'm fine." "You're crying," Nathaniel pointed out. "That's not fine. Talk to me, Clara. What's going on in that head of yours?" The kindness in his voice broke through her defenses, and Clara felt the tears spill over. "I'm scared," she admitted, "scared that this is all too good to be true. Scared that you're going to wake up one day and realize I'm exactly as ordinary as I've always said I am. Scared that when you go back to your pack, you'll forget about me and find someone more suitable, and I'll be left here alone again, except now I'll know exactly what I'm missing." Nathaniel took the pot from her hands and set it aside, then turned her to face him. His hands were gentle on her shoulders, his gray eyes serious and intent. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "I am not going to wake up one day and realize you're ordinary, because you're not ordinary. You're extraordinary in ways that have nothing to do with conventional beauty or social status. You have a kind heart and a generous spirit and more strength than you give yourself credit for. You survived losing both parents young. You raised your sister alone. You built a life for yourself through sheer determination and hard work. That's not ordinary, Clara. That's remarkable." "But what if it's not enough?" Clara whispered. "What if being remarkable in those ways isn't enough for an alpha who needs a mate that can help him lead a pack?" Nathaniel cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Then I'll teach you everything you need to know about leading a pack," he said firmly. "I'll stand beside you and support you, and make sure you never feel like you're drowning in responsibilities you don't understand. But Clara, you need to understand something. I don't need a mate who already knows how to navigate pack politics. I can find advisors for that. I don't need someone who can host perfect formal dinners. I can hire staff for that. What I need, what I've been searching for my entire life, is someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who sees the man beneath the title. Someone who challenges me to think differently and feels like home when I'm tired of performing for everyone else. That's you, Clara. You're what I need, exactly as you are." The sincerity in his voice, the intensity in his eyes, it was overwhelming. Clara felt something shift inside her, some final wall of resistance crumbling under the weight of his conviction. She had spent her entire life believing she was not enough, that she needed to be prettier or cleverer or more accomplished to deserve love and happiness. But Nathaniel was telling her the opposite. He was saying she was enough, that she had always been enough, that the things she thought made her ordinary were actually what made her valuable. "I want to believe you," she said, her voice shaking. "I want to believe that I could be what you need. But Nathaniel, I'm terrified. What if I fail? What if I can't learn to be the Luna your pack needs? What if I embarrass you or let you down or—" "Then you'll learn from it and do better next time," Nathaniel interrupted gently. "Clara, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for partnership. I'm looking for someone who will grow with me, who will make mistakes and learn from them, who will support me when I need it and challenge me when I'm wrong. You've already been doing that for the past 2 weeks, without even realizing it. You're already being exactly what I need." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. "Please," he said quietly, "please give us a chance. Give yourself a chance to see what I see when I look at you. Let me show you that you're worthy of love and happiness and everything good this world has to offer." Clara closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her, letting herself feel the truth in them. She had been so focused on all the reasons this could not work that she had not allowed herself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, It could. Maybe Nathaniel was right. Maybe she did have value. Maybe she was worthy of being loved for who she was rather than who she thought she should be. Okay, she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. Okay, I'll give us a chance. I'll try to believe in myself the way you seem to believe in me. Nathaniel's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face with joy. Thank you, he said, pulling her into an embrace that felt like coming home. Thank you for being brave enough to try. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms by the wash basin in Clara's tiny kitchen, and for the first time in her life, Clara felt truly seen and valued and loved, not for what she could do or how useful she could be, but for who she was at her core. It was a feeling she had never expected to experience, and it filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. The next morning, Nathaniel asked Clara to accompany him back to Northern Ridge territory. Not permanently, he clarified quickly. Just for a visit. I want you to see where I live, meet my pack, understand what life would be like if you chose to be with me. And I want them to meet you, to see what I see when I look at you. Clara's first instinct was to refuse, to insist that she was not ready for that kind of exposure. That meeting his entire pack was too overwhelming, but she had promised to give them a chance, to try believing in herself, and hiding away in her cottage would not accomplish that. So she agreed, her stomach churning with nerves, and spent the day preparing for the journey. Josephine's old traveling dress was too small, so Clara stayed up late altering one of her own dresses to be more presentable, her fingers flying over the fabric with the skill of years of practice. She might not be beautiful, but at least she could look neat and well presented. The journey to Northern Ridge took 3 days by horse, and Clara spent most of that time fighting down panic about what awaited her at the end. Nathaniel seemed to sense her anxiety and kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling her stories about his pack members, describing the territory and the pack house, preparing her for what she would encounter. They're going to love you, he assured her when they stopped to make camp the second night. I know it's intimidating, but they're good people. They'll see what I see. Clara wanted to believe him, but the closer they got to Northern Ridge, the more her old insecurities came flooding back. She was a seamstress, from a tiny cottage at the edge of nowhere. What business did she have thinking she could fit in with an alpha's pack, much less become their Luna? When they finally arrived at the Northern Ridge pack house, Clara felt her breath catch in her throat. It was massive, a sprawling stone structure that looked more like a castle than a home, with towers and courtyards and gardens that stretched as far as she could see. Wolves in fine clothing moved through the grounds with purpose, all of them radiating the kind of confidence and poise that Clara had never possessed. This is home, Nathaniel said, helping her down from her horse. Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone. The next few hours were a blur of names and faces, of people looking at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to outright hostility. Nathaniel's advisors were the worst, their polite smiles not quite reaching their eyes as they assessed her and clearly found her wanting. One of them, a sharp-faced woman named Celeste, who served as the pack's chief strategist, actually laughed when Nathaniel introduced Clara as someone he was courting. You're courting a seamstress, she said, not even bothering to lower her voice. Nathaniel, surely you're joking. This is some kind of test for us, isn't it? To see if we'll object to an obviously unsuitable match? Nathaniel's expression went cold in a way Clara had never seen before. I don't joke about matters of the heart, Celeste, he said, his voice carrying the weight of his alpha authority. "And I'd appreciate it if you'd show Clara the respect she deserves. She's my guest, and someone I care about deeply." Celeste subsided, but the damage was done. Clara could feel the judgment radiating from everyone around her, could see them taking in her simple dress and plain face and ordinary manner, comparing her to whatever beautiful, accomplished women Nathaniel had courted before, and finding her severely lacking. The formal dinner that evening was even worse. Clara was seated at Nathaniel's right hand, a position of honor that only emphasized how out of place she was. The other pack members engaged in sophisticated conversation about politics and strategy, and pack alliances, dropping names and references that Clara did not understand, clearly showing off their knowledge and accomplishments. Clara sat quietly, trying to follow the conversation but feeling more and more like an imposter who had wandered into a world where she did not belong. When the meal was served, elaborate courses prepared by professional cooks and presented on fine china, Clara found herself thinking about the simple meals she had shared with Nathaniel in her cottage. Those meals had been comfortable and easy, filled with genuine conversation rather than performative displays of wit and knowledge. This felt like a test she was failing with every moment that passed. After dinner, when Nathaniel was pulled away by an advisor who insisted there was an urgent matter requiring his attention, Clara found herself alone in a corner of the grand hall, trying to become invisible. She was so focused on not being noticed that she did not see Celeste approaching until the woman was standing directly in front of her. "You seem like a nice enough person," Celeste said, her tone condescending. "So I'm going to be honest with you. You don't belong here. You're a distraction, a temporary infatuation that Nathaniel will outgrow once the novelty wears off. Do yourself a favor and leave now before you get hurt." Clara felt the words like a physical blow, each one confirming every fear and insecurity she had been fighting against. "I know I'm not what you expected," she managed, trying to keep her voice steady. "But Nathaniel asked me to come. He wants me here." "For now," Celeste said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "But what happens when he realizes you can't actually help him lead this pack? When he sees that you have no political connections, no strategic value, no skills that would benefit our territory? You're a seamstress, Clara. A nice enough woman, I'm sure, but completely unsuitable to be Luna of one of the most powerful packs in the Northern Territories." The rational part of Clara's brain knew she should defend herself, should stand up to this woman's cruelty and assert her right to be here. But the part of her that had been told her entire life that she was plain and ordinary and not good enough, that part was screaming that Celeste was right. She did not belong here. She was foolish to think she ever could. "I need some air," Clara said abruptly, turning away from Celeste and heading for the nearest door. She found herself in one of the pack house gardens, the cool night air a relief after the stifling atmosphere inside. She sank onto a stone bench, her hands shaking, fighting back tears. Maybe this had all been a mistake. Maybe she should never have agreed to come here. Maybe she should leave in the morning before she got hurt even worse. "Clara," Nathaniel's voice came from behind her, filled with concern. "What are you doing out here? Everyone's looking for you." Clara kept her eyes fixed on the garden path, unable to look at him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I just needed to get away for a minute. It's overwhelming in there." Nathaniel sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders were touching. "Someone said something to upset you," he stated rather than asked. "Tell me who and what they said." "It doesn't matter," Clara said, but her voice broke on the words. "They're right anyway. I don't fit in here. I don't know how to talk about politics or strategy. I don't have connections or influence or anything that would make me a suitable Luna. I'm just a seamstress who can cook decent meals, and that's not enough." "Stop," Nathaniel said firmly, turning her to face him. "Stop letting other people's narrow definitions of value make you question your worth. Yes, there are people in my pack who think being Luna is about political connections and strategic alliances, but that's because they've never seen what real leadership looks like. My mother wasn't born into power or influence. She was the Omega daughter of a farmer, someone my father's advisor said was completely unsuitable to be his mate. But she became the greatest Luna this pack has ever known, because she led with her heart. She cared about every member of the pack, from the highest-ranked warrior to the lowliest servant. She made people feel valued and seen. She created a sense of community that lasted long after she was gone." He cupped Clara's face in his hands, making her meet his eyes. "That's what I see in you," he said passionately. "That same capacity for genuine care and connection. That same strength that comes from kindness rather than power. You think you don't have anything to offer, but Clara, you have everything that matters. And anyone who can't see that is too blind to deserve your time or attention." "But what if I fail?" Clara whispered. "What if I try to be your Luna and I can't do it? What if I let you down?" "Then you'll get back up and try again," Nathaniel said simply. "Just like you did when you burned that bread on the first night we met. Just like you did when you lost your parents and had to figure out how to survive on your own. You have more resilience than you realize, Clara. And you won't be doing it alone. I'll be there every step of the way." Through the tears that were now flowing freely down her cheeks, Clara felt something shift inside her. She had been so focused on all the ways she might fail that she had not considered the possibility that she might actually succeed, that the qualities she thought made her ordinary might actually make her extraordinary in this role, that her capacity for genuine care and authentic connection might be exactly what this pack needed. "I'm scared," she admitted, terrified actually. "But I want to try. I want to see if I can be what you believe I can be." "That's all I'm asking," Nathaniel said, pulling her into his arms. "Just try. Give yourself a chance. The rest will follow." Over the following weeks, Clara slowly began to find her place in Northern Ridge Pack. It was not easy. There were plenty of pack members like Celeste who made their skepticism clear, who watched her every move waiting for her to fail. But there were also those who welcomed her warmly, who saw past her plain appearance and simple background to the person beneath. She met Emma, the pack's elderly healer, who reminded her so much of her grandmother that Clara found herself spending hours in the healing rooms, learning about herbs and remedies. She met Thomas, a young warrior who was struggling with the trauma of his first real battle, and found that her ability to listen without judgment helped him more than any formal counseling had. She met children who were fascinated by her sewing skills and begged her to teach them, and found joy in passing on the knowledge her mother had given her. And slowly, carefully, Clara began to realize that being Luna was not about being perfect or accomplished or beautiful. It was about being present, about seeing people and caring for them, and creating connections that strengthened the whole pack. It was about using whatever skills and talents you had, however ordinary they seemed, in service of something larger than yourself. One evening, about 2 months after arriving at Northern Ridge, Clara found herself in the pack kitchen preparing dinner. Not because she had to. The pack employed professional cooks who would have been mortified to know she was doing their job, but because she found comfort in the familiar rhythms of cooking. She was making stew, the same simple recipe her mother had taught her years ago, when Nathaniel found her. "You're cooking," he observed with amusement. "We have people who do that, you know." "I know," Clara said, stirring the pot. "But I wanted to. It helps me think. Plus, I miss the simplicity of it sometimes. Everything here is so elaborate and formal. Sometimes I just want to make plain food and remember who I am beneath all the expectations." Nathaniel moved to stand beside her, peering into the pot. "That smells amazing," he said. "Much better than anything our professional cooks have made recently." Clara smiled. "It's just stew. Nothing fancy." "Exactly," Nathaniel said. "It's honest food made with care rather than food designed to impress. That's what I love about you, Clara. You bring authenticity to everything you do. You remind this pack that sometimes the simple things are the most valuable." As if to prove his point, when Clara served the stew to the household staff and guards who were around at dinner time, their response was overwhelming. They raved about it, some of them asking for seconds and thirds, declaring it the best meal they had eaten in months. Word spread, and soon pack members were asking if Clara would consider teaching some of her recipes to the kitchen staff, if she might be willing to occasionally prepare meals for special occasions. And Clara realized something important. Her cooking, which she had thought was just an ordinary skill, was actually a gift. It created comfort and connection. It brought people together. It showed care in a tangible way. It was valuable not despite its simplicity, but because of it. She started spending time in the kitchens regularly, not just cooking, but also talking with the staff, learning their names and their stories, making them feel valued and seen. She organized a community dinner where pack members could come together and share simple, home-cooked food rather than formal meals. She created a sense of warmth and belonging that had been missing from the pack's elaborate social events, and people responded. The pack members who had initially been skeptical of her started to warm up. They saw that she was not trying to be something she was not, but rather bringing her authentic self to the role of Luna and making it work in unexpected ways. Even Celeste, the sharp-faced advisor who had been so dismissive, grudgingly admitted that Clara had a talent for bringing the pack together in ways that formal leadership could not achieve. 6 months after arriving at Northern Ridge, Nathaniel proposed. He did it simply, without fanfare or elaborate staging, in the same garden where Clara had nearly left after that first difficult dinner. He got down on one knee and offered her a ring that had belonged to his mother, and asked if she would consent to be his mate and his Luna. Clara said yes without hesitation, tears streaming down her face. Not because she thought she had all the answers or had become the perfect Luna, but because she had learned something crucial over the past months. She did not need to be perfect. She just needed to be herself, bringing her authentic gifts and genuine care to a role that had room for many different kinds of strength. The mating ceremony was held on a crisp autumn evening, under the same kind of clear sky that had witnessed so many pack ceremonies before. Clara wore a dress she had sewn herself, simple but beautiful, that reflected who she was, rather than who others thought she should be. Nathaniel stood beside her in formal attire, looking at her with such love and pride that Clara felt her heart might burst. As they exchanged vows in front of the assembled pack, Clara thought about the woman she had been just months ago, convinced she was plain and ordinary and had nothing special to offer. She thought about the burned bread and the self-deprecating comments and the certainty that no one would ever see value in her. And she realized how wrong she had been, not because she had transformed into someone different, but because she had learned to see her own worth. The ceremony concluded with Nathaniel marking her as his mate, a bite to the shoulder that would bond them together for life. As the mate bond settled into place, warm and permanent and perfect, Clara felt complete in a way she never had before. Not because finding a mate made her whole, but because accepting love had allowed her to finally see herself clearly. In the years that followed, Luna Clara became known throughout the Northern Territories, not for her beauty or political savvy, but for her genuine care for every member of her pack. She revolutionized how the pack house operated, bringing warmth and authenticity to formal events, creating community gatherings that strengthened pack bonds, using her skills with cooking and sewing, and listening to make people feel valued and seen. She and Nathaniel led together, his strategic strength complemented by her emotional intelligence, his authority balanced by her compassion. They were partners in every sense of the word, each bringing different gifts to their shared role. When young Omegas would come to Clara feeling insecure about their value, she would tell them her story, about the burned bread and the plain face and the certainty that she had nothing special to offer, about learning that ordinary skills applied with genuine care could be extraordinary. About discovering that you did not need to be beautiful or clever or accomplished to be valuable. You just needed to be authentically yourself. And sometimes, when she was alone in the kitchen preparing a simple meal or sitting by the fire with Nathaniel in comfortable silence, Clara would think back to that first night when a stranger had knocked on her door and she had apologized for being plain and uninteresting. She would think about how close she had come to missing all of this because she could not see her own worth, and she would feel grateful beyond measure that Nathaniel had seen what she could not, had believed in her when she did not believe in herself, had loved her, not despite her ordinariness, but because of the extraordinary heart that beat beneath it. Because in the end, that was what mattered most. Not beauty or cleverness or impressive accomplishments, but kindness and authenticity and the courage to be genuinely yourself in a world that constantly demanded you be someone else. That was the real magic, the real strength, the real value. And Clara had possessed it all along, waiting only for someone to help her see it. The first winter, as Luna tested Clara, in ways she had not anticipated, a harsh storm struck Northern Ridge Territory in late December, cutting off several outlying families from the main pack house. The roads were impassable, supplies were running low, and panic was beginning to spread through the isolated communities. Nathaniel and his warriors were working around the clock to clear paths and deliver emergency provisions, but the scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Clara found herself in the great hall of the pack house, which had been converted into a coordination center for the relief efforts. Advisors were arguing about resource allocation, debating which families should receive aid first based on their status and importance to pack operations. The conversation made Clara's stomach turn. These were not resources to be distributed based on hierarchy. These were people, families with children, and elderly members who needed help regardless of their rank or position. "Excuse me," Clara said, her voice cutting through the arguments. Every head in the room turned to look at her, and she felt the familiar flutter of self-doubt. But she thought about the woman she had been when Nathaniel first met her, apologizing for burned bread and convinced she had nothing valuable to offer. She thought about everything she had learned since then, about her own worth and the power of authentic care. She straightened her shoulders and continued, "We're approaching this all wrong. We're treating this like a political problem when it's a human problem. These families need help not based on their importance to PAC operations, but based on their actual need. One of the senior advisors, a man named Gerald, who had never hidden his skepticism about Clara's suitability as Luna, scoffed. "With all due respect, Luna Clara, you don't understand the complexities of PAC management. We have to make strategic decisions about resource allocation. We can't just give aid based on feelings." "I'm not talking about feelings," Clara said firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm talking about actual need. Have any of you actually talked to these families? Do you know which ones have infants who need formula? Which ones have diabetic members who need medication? Which ones have elderly wolves who won't survive another night without heat? Or are you all so busy calculating political advantage that you've forgotten these are real people we're supposed to be protecting?" The room fell silent. Clara could feel Nathaniel watching her from across the hall, could sense his pride and support through their mate bond, and it gave her the courage to continue. "I'm going to the kitchens," she announced. "I'm going to organize teams to prepare hot meals and emergency supply packages based on actual family needs rather than PAC politics. Anyone who wants to help me is welcome. Anyone who wants to keep arguing about strategy can stay here." She walked out of the great hall without waiting for a response, her heart pounding. But within minutes, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find not just Nathaniel, but also Emma the healer, Thomas the young warrior, and a dozen other PAC members who had apparently decided that Clara's approach made more sense than the advisor's political calculations. They worked through the night, Clara organizing teams with the efficiency she had learned from years of managing a household on limited resources. She sent Emma to compile a list of medical needs. She had Thomas coordinate with the warriors to identify which routes were most critical for reaching vulnerable families. She mobilized the kitchen staff to prepare hearty, portable meals that could be easily reheated. And she did it all with the same authentic care she had always brought to everything, treating each family's needs as equally important, regardless of their rank. By dawn, they had relief packages ready for every isolated family, organized not by status, but by urgency of need. The warriors who went out to deliver them reported back that several families had been on the verge of crisis, that Clara's intervention had literally saved lives. And when Gerald and the other advisors saw the success of her approach, saw how the PAC rallied around authentic care rather than political maneuvering, their skepticism began to crack. That spring brought another challenge. A young Omega named Sarah came to Clara in tears, confessing that she was pregnant and unwed, that the father had rejected her, and that she was terrified of being cast out of the PAC for bringing shame on her family. Clara listened to the girl's story and felt her own heart break for her. She remembered what it felt like to be convinced you were worthless, to believe that one mistake or perceived failing could destroy your entire future. "She's only 17, Sarah's mother said when she came to plead for her daughter's case. "She made a foolish choice, but she's a good girl. Please, Luna Clara, don't let them exile her. We'll take care of the baby somehow. We'll manage." Clara looked at the frightened young Omega and saw herself, saw every woman who had ever been told she was not good enough, that she had failed to meet expectations, that she deserved to be cast aside, and she made a decision that would define her reign as Luna. "Sarah will stay," Clara announced firmly. "Not just stay, but she'll be supported. The PAC will help her finish her education. We'll make sure she has proper prenatal care. We'll help her prepare for motherhood, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." There were objections, of course. PAC members who believed unwed mothers brought shame on the community, who thought Clara was being too lenient, who worried about the message it would send. But Clara stood her ground, and Nathaniel stood beside her, and together they made it clear that Northern Ridgepack would be a place that supported its members through difficult times rather than abandoning them. Sarah's daughter was born healthy and beautiful that winter, and the young Omega flourished with the pack's support, eventually becoming a skilled healer herself. And Clara knew that this compassionate leadership that valued people over politics was exactly what she was meant to do as Luna. The years continued to unfold, bringing challenges and triumphs, heartbreaks and joys. Clara never did become the sophisticated, politically savvy Luna that some pack members thought she should be. She remained herself, authentic and caring, and sometimes painfully honest about her own insecurities. But she discovered that being herself was enough, more than enough, because authenticity inspired others to be authentic too. She created a pack culture where vulnerability was strength rather than weakness, where asking for help was encouraged rather than shameful, where every member felt valued regardless of their rank or accomplishments. And the pack thrived under her and Nathaniel's joint leadership in ways that had nothing to do with political alliances or strategic advantages, and everything to do with genuine community. Years later, when her own daughter came to her worried about not being pretty enough or clever enough to attract a mate, Clara would smile and tell her about the night she whispered to an alpha, "I ain't pretty, sir, but I can cook." She would tell her about how those words, meant as an apology, had somehow opened a door to everything she had never dared to hope for. And she would teach her daughter what Nathaniel had taught her, that your value does not come from meeting other people's expectations, but from being courageously, authentically, unapologetically yourself. Because somewhere out there is someone who will see that authenticity and recognize it for the rare and precious gift it is. Someone who will love you not despite your ordinariness, but because of the extraordinary heart that makes you exactly who you are. And when you find that person, when you allow yourself to be seen and valued and loved for your true self, that is when you discover that you were never ordinary at all. You were always extraordinary. You just needed the right eyes to help you see it.